welcome back to Taylor Fashion. On today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this dress. So I'm going to be taking you through how I made the top half, how I made the bubble bottom, and also how I made the halter collar neckline. So make sure to stick around and watch this video till the end. Let's get right into the tutorial. I have my basic bodice already drafted out, so this video is not too long. But if you don't know how to create this, I'm going to link a video right now at the top of this video, so you could click on that and it's going to take you to a video I made previously on how to draft a basic bodice pattern. So you can go and watch that and then come back to this video. This pattern is cut on fold, so I'm going to be taking measurements accordingly. So first, I am taking the neckline depth to be 3 inches deep and the width is 3 inches wide. So to create the armhole area, I'm going to bring down the armhole at the chest line by 1.5 inches. So the normal armhole length here is 7.5 inches, but I'm bringing it down by extra 1.5 inches because I feel like it's going to look better if it's a bit lower. You don't have to bring yours down, but that was what I preferred, so I brought it down a bit, and I'm going to connect that to the neckline. Then I'm going to go ahead to cut out this pattern. Then I'm going to use the front pattern to draft out the pattern for the back piece. So first thing I'm going to do is to mark out the new depth of the armhole on the back piece so that I know that that's where the top of the back piece is going to start from. Something else I'm going to do is that I'm going to take about 1 inch at the waistline at the center back, and the bust line and the chest line, basically from the waistline up, I'm going to take about 1 inch, and this is so that the zip allowance or the zip can balance properly behind and it doesn't bulge. So after doing that, I can take my normal zip allowance of 1 inch. So now I'm placing the front piece on it so I could trace out the back piece and cut it. It's basically the same thing with the dart, and the only difference is with the zip allowance at the bottom because of that little extension at the bottom there. So because it's extended out at the center back, I need to take the extension back in at the side. So I'm just going to measure it and take whatever it is in at the side. If not, I'm going to have excess fabric at that lower segment of the back piece. So after doing that, I can go ahead to trim out the rest of the pattern, and the neckline for the back is going to be at the depth of the armhole. After doing that, I can go ahead to also mark the dart on the back piece. So how I'm going to do this is that I'm going to take a needle and I'm going to poke holes in the 4 corners of the dart, and the holes that I've poked, because they'll be visible on the back piece, I can then go ahead to connect those poked holes together to form the dart on the back piece. So something else I'm going to do is to create a dart at the armhole so it doesn't gape. So the dart is 2.5 inches long and I'm taking it on the chest line, and it is 1 inch wide. I went ahead to cut out the pattern on fabric, and I gave about 1 cm allowances on the parts that do not have the allowances, like the neck, the armhole, the top and the bottom. And I also traced the dart measurement onto the fabric, the back of the fabric, so I could sew easily. I didn't cut lining for this because I didn't want to use the lining. The fabric is slightly elastic, so I didn't want it to lose its elasticity. That's why, and it's quite thick, so I'm not using a lining for the top half. Now let's go ahead to cut out the bottom half. For the bubble part of the dress, it's going to have a lining and the main fabric piece. So this is the lining I'm going to cut out first, and the shape of the lining is going to be different from the shape of the main fabric piece. So what you want to do is you're going to cut a 1/4 flea for the lining and cut a full 360 flea for the main fabric piece. So this is how you cut a 1/4 flea for the lining piece. So you're going to place the fabric down, and this is not going to be cut on fold or anything. You're just placing your fabric down, and you're going to take your upper hip measurement, or the measurement of the place that you want to attach it to, and then you're going to divide it by 1.57. It's going to give you a figure, and that figure you're going to measure from the corner of the fabric there, round the fabric. And when you're done measuring that figure down, you're just going to connect it. So for example, my upper hip measurement is 37 inches, so I go ahead to divide that by 1.57. That's 23.5. So I measured out 23.5 from the top corner there, round the fabric, and that's what I marked out, and now I'm cutting it out. So after doing that, I can go ahead to measure the length of the flea. Another difference with the bubble pattern is that the lining is usually shorter than the main fabric piece. So if your normal length is, for example, mine is 10.5, I'm going to take out 2 inches, so I'm measuring 8.5 on the lining instead. And the 2 inches that I've taken out in lining, I'm going to add to the main fabric piece when we're cutting out the main fabric piece. So I'm just measuring 8.5 inches round from the top there. So this is what a 1/4 flea or a quarter flea looks like on the lining piece. Now I can go ahead to cut my full flea or my 360 flea on the main fabric. So I'm going to take my main fabric and fold it into 4. After folding my fabric in 4, I'm going to take my upper hip measurements and multiply it by 2 first, because this flea is going to be gathered, so you need excess fabric to be able to gather it. After multiplying by 2, I'm going to take whatever I get and then divide it by 4, because I folded the fabric in 4. Whatever I get, I can then place on the fabric and mark out. So I'm just going to use the measurement to form a semicircle like this. Now I can go ahead to measure the length of the flea from the semicircle I just created. So I mentioned earlier that I took out 2 inches on the lining piece because the lining piece is shorter than the main fabric piece. So that 2 inches I'm going to add back into this main fabric piece. So instead of taking the normal 10.5 inches as the length, I'm taking 12.5 inches, and I'm just going to measure that round. I'm done with cutting the lower half of this dress. Now I can go ahead to start sewing. First, I went ahead to transfer the dart measurement onto the main fabric piece at the back so that it can be easier for me to sew the darts. Then I'm just going to go ahead to sew all of the individual darts. So after sewing in the darts, I cut out a little piece of lining fabric so I could line the armhole, the edges of the armhole and the top or the back neckline. So I'll stitch the piece of lining to the part that I want to turn in, top stitch, and I'll make sure that I'm trimming out all the excess fabric so I could fold it to be very thin. After top stitching and trimming out all of the excesses, I'm just going to go ahead to fold it in and sew. This is what I have now, and I'll repeat the process for the other armhole and for the top of the 2 back pieces. So after repeating the process for the back pieces, the top of the back pieces, I can go ahead to attach the zip, and I'm using an invisible zip. After attaching the zip, I can go ahead to join the front and the back pieces together by the sides with the seam allowance that I took while drafting the pattern. So after joining the front and the back pieces together, I can work on the lower half of the dress, which is the bubble part. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my main fabric and gather it to be the size that would fit the upper half of the dress. So I went on to my sewing machine and I changed my sewing foot to a gather foot, and I'm just going to go ahead to gather it. So this is what I have. It didn't gather properly, but I'll just go ahead to join the top half to the gathered part, and I'll just feed in the rest or the excess to fit the top half. After doing that, I'm going to go ahead to gather the bottom of the flea also to give it the bubble effect. Now I can go ahead to attach the quarter flea that we cut earlier to it, and I'm going to attach the bottom of the quarter flea to the bottom of the main fabric, and I'm just going to make sure that they are both the same size. The gathered part should fit the bottom of the lining, and I also joined the lining side by side first before going ahead to attach this. After joining the bottom of the lining to the bottom of the main fabric, I'll just flip the lining over so I can join the top of the lining to the joining there, or the top of the main fabric also. And I'm going to do a normal stitch, it won't be gathered. So that's it for the bubble part of this dress, and you can go ahead to just trim out any excess there and weave so you can have neat finishing. Then right now what I'm going to do is to finish up with the neckline. I'm going to go ahead to cut the collar piece and attach it to the neckline. So I went ahead to measure the neckline on the front piece, which is 10 inches, but the total neckline plus the back is 15 inches. So I'm going to be cutting out 15 inches, but 10 inches is going to be connected to the front piece. So I'm going to cut this on fold. So 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'm just going to mark 7.5 down. You shouldn't cut the collar straight so it doesn't look weird on the neckline. So I'm just going to extend it up by 1 inch from the 7 inches that I marked, and then curve it to the center front. I'm going to measure the height of the collar now, and I picked it to be 3 cm high. So I'll just mark it from the new point that I made there, 3 cm up, and I'm also going to mark 3 cm at the other end, the center front, and then connect it to form the shape of the collar. I have a piece of fabric here and it's already folded, so I'm cutting this pattern on fold. I place the pattern paper on it and I'm pinning it down so it doesn't move about. And now I'm going to cut this pattern out, leaving seam allowances at the edge, about half a centimeter seam allowance. Something else I'm doing is I'm going to use my pen to lightly trace out the pattern of the collar on the fabric so I can separate it from the allowance when I'm sewing. So I went ahead to cut out another similar piece to serve as the back. So this is the front and the back pieces for the collar. And now I'm going to join them together at the sides and at the top. So this is why it was important for me to mark out the exact shape of the collar from the pattern on the fabric. So I'm going to sew the allowances, but I'm not going to sew the allowance on the bottom. I'm just going to sew the sides and the top. Now I can go ahead to trim out the excess and turn this inside out and also iron it so it could be neat. What I'm going to do now to the bottom of the collar is that because I didn't sew it completely down, I'm going to use the seam allowance on one side and fold the seam allowance in. So that's going to be the folded side of the collar, and we're going to have the other side extended. So that part I'm going to sew onto the rest of my dress, and the folded part of the collar is what I'm going to use to top stitch after I'm done joining to the rest of the dress. So I notched the middle of the collar piece, and I'm going to notch the middle of the neckline so I could attach it properly. So I'm sewing only the parts that will be attached to the rest of the dress first. Sewing one side, then I'm going to turn it over and then top stitch everything, fold in the excess at the two sides and top stitch on the middle part. To finish off, I'll just go ahead to attach my button and buttonhole to the back of the collar. So that's all for this video. I hope you're able to gain one or two things from this video. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions, or share this video to someone that might find this video helpful. Thank you, and I'm going to see you in my next video.